Hi everyone. In March of this year, two of the oldest remaining Quake records were beaten by two separate players within a single week. The previous runs on E2M6 had long been considered optimized, and each had stood for more than 20 years before being broken by Ryan Moore on Easy Skill and Jozef Saluntai on Nightmare. E2M6 is notoriously painful to speedrun. Despite being over a minute long, the runs themselves only contain about 10 seconds of real gameplay, with the rest of the time spent simply waiting around. This meant that the task of saving a full second seemed difficult, if not impossible. In this video, I'll cover the history of runs on the map and how, using a variety of extremely difficult tricks and tweaks, players managed to turn this boring run into something incredible. I hope you like it. E2M6 is a beautiful, sprawling map and one of the largest levels in the original game. Its early design was even bigger, including this long series of caves at the beginning, but that had to be cut to accommodate the limits of the engine at the time. The map has three main sections connected to this open space near the entrance. As you complete each part, this center bridge changes, allowing access to the next area. It's a great example of the classic Quake level design where you need to revisit certain parts of the map in order to progress. Even just glancing at this central space, it's not hard to imagine what speedrunners would be thinking. Each section is wide open, and only the lack of a bridge is stopping us from skipping straight to the final area. Sure enough, the very first runs on this map already took advantage of this. As early as 1997, Nolan recorded this demo on Easy Skill, luring a fiend onto the bridge and boosting across the gap. In 1998, Evan Wagner found a much faster way to do this fiend boost, and 2 years after that, Joe tweaked it again for a further 2-second improvement. This trick looked spectacular, and Joe's version seemed close to perfect. But as bunny hopping and air control started to evolve, players realized that there was an even simpler solution. All that was needed to reach the last area was a well-spaced and well-timed jump. And this is exactly how Evan managed to shave a further 2 seconds from Joe's time in February of 2000. On Nightmare Skill, things looked a little different. Nolan again started things off with the fiend boost, but players quickly realized that this additional ogre could be put to use. Joe was the first runner to boost across the gap using an ogre grenade jump in the year 2000, and he improved the run again just a few short months later. So far, this is all looking great for speedruns on this map. What could be better than fun tricks boosting straight from the beginning to the final area? Unfortunately, after skipping more than 2/3 of the map with a single jump, players then face the true final boss, the one level design feature which strikes terror into the hearts of all speedrunners, not just in Quake, but across all games and genres. A 60-second, unskippable elevator sequence. No! I get it from a level design perspective, I do. It's dramatic. You battle your way through a giant level and enter an inconspicuous room. Suddenly, a barrier slams shut behind you. The way out is blocked. As the floor slowly starts to descend, waves of enemies teleport in, and you struggle to survive the frantic, cramped battles. When will it end? You breathe a sigh of relief as the slow descent stops and a new door opens, only to reveal one of the game's most terrifying enemies, the Vor, for the first time. What a rush. At least it was the first time we played the map. The 1000th time? Not so much. Here's where you might say, at least there's some combat on the way down to keep you entertained. Fighting the monster hordes stops the run from getting too boring, right? Well, this could have been the case, especially considering that in individual level runs, you only start with the shotgun and a tiny bit of ammo. Getting through this elevator sequence on Nightmare skill with no weapons or armor would be a challenge. But it turns out that you can skip the combat entirely. First of all, you can telefrag these shamblers simply by standing in their teleport location. The map makers also placed a trigger during the descent, which spawns an additional wave of enemies. If you stand inside these tiny ledges, you'll just barely avoid the trigger, and no monsters appear. This turns the epic elevator sequence into this. If you're familiar with other FPS speedruns like Half-Life, you will have seen some of the crazy out-of-bounds glitches. Players have searched far and wide for a way to skip this elevator sequence, but Quake is almost unbelievably stable for a game made in 1996. On the original maps, the only way players have ever managed to get out of bounds was due to a glitch where you die and start endlessly falling through the void. But being dead isn't particularly useful to speedrunners. Only a few short weeks ago, Elgu did the first ever Quake run utilizing an out-of-bounds glitch on this map from Quake's second expansion pack, Dissolution of Eternity. But this glitch is only made possible due to a flaw in the map's design and compilation. As far as we know, nothing similar is possible on the original maps. They're simply too well made. So we're stuck with the elevator. Is there anything useful we can do during these unavoidable 60 seconds? For 100% runs, there's a clear answer. Start the elevator sequence at the beginning of the run and complete the other parts of the map while it descends. This saves a huge amount of time on both easy and nightmare skill. For full game any percent runs, you need to collect the rune at the end of the map. And that opens up the crazy strategy of killing the final Vor with the lightning gun bug, which I covered in a recent video. But for individual level runs, this isn't necessary because we don't need the rune. And all the way back in 2000, players realized that the fearsome Vors in the final room could be put to good use. All it took was a well-timed Vorball jump to skip straight to the exit. This renders any other strategy useless, and means that these runs, despite being the longest any percent demos in the game, are mostly spent just waiting from the moment you start the elevator sequence by hitting this trigger to the moment this trigger opens the final door. So, in the early 2000s, most players agreed that these runs were unbeatable. In 2001, Joe managed to squeeze out one additional second from Evan's time on easy skill using faster bunnies and a better Vorball boost. And in 2002, he found a spectacular way of performing the Ogre Grenade boost on Nightmare skill. Instead of jumping out to the central pillar and turning around for the boost, he performed a completely blind jump, got hit in the back with the grenade, and kept the speed with a bunny across to the elevator area. The map was done. What more time could possibly be saved? Cut to 20 years later. New players, new discoveries and techniques, and almost all the records from this golden era of Quake had been defeated, but E2M6 remained, stubbornly refusing to relinquish its top position on SDA's oldest demos list. Then comes Chambers. We've seen over and over again how he is able to squeeze out tiny improvements to runs with superior modern movement and power bunnies. But even his godlike movement wasn't enough here. The time spent actually speedrunning was just too short. He needed something else, a brand new way of saving time, and it wasn't until very recently that a potential method appeared. Just a few years ago, Half-Life players such as Muty, who were also active in Quake, pointed out that you could hit triggers ever so slightly faster by lowering the game's frame rate a split second before you touch them. Manual frame rate manipulation is a technique which has had its share of controversy, but the reality is that it's been a part of the game in different forms for a long time and isn't going anywhere. You obviously can't see the triggers while playing, so you need to know the exact location and split-second timing to perform this trick, and even then, it's not 100% consistent. However you might feel about these FPS tricks, there's no denying the incredible precision they require. On E2M6, Chambers was able to utilize 3 FPS triggers, more than in any other previous demo. Each one saved at most a single tenth of a second. First this button, then this trigger starting the elevator sequence, and then this one opening the final door to the exit. Chambers knew that combined with his typical flawless movement, these tricks would be just enough to push him over the edge, and on the 23rd of March 2023, the final E2M6 easy run was finished. The perfect bridge skip, 3 FPS triggers, and a perfect Vorball boost, all for a time of 1 minute and 14 seconds. The final second saved over Joe's 21-year-old record. As soon as Joe saw this, he worried that his nightmare run was also in danger. This run doesn't rely as much on bunny hops or movement, so Joe wondered if he might be able to tweak the tricks in order to squeeze out 1 more second and beat Chambers to the record. In the 20 years that had passed since Joe's last run, we had seen some truly spectacular ogre grenade jumps. People still regularly underestimate just how high and fast a perfect boost can launch you, and Joe had a brilliant idea. Instead of jumping onto the middle pillar, it turned out you can just barely boost all the way across to the final room in a single jump. This is one of those tricks which might look simple, but the chances of success are incredibly low. It took hundreds of attempts, sometimes hours of playing, for each successful jump. But of course, that's only the beginning of the run. In order to bring the record down a full second, Joe also had to introduce a spectacular double Vorball jump in the final room. This is also unbelievably difficult to pull off. Both of these Vors have to fire so that their projectiles line up to boost Joe at the exact same time that he jumps. Joe found a way to initially hide from the second Vor to help with the timing, but it's still painfully random and luck dependent. So let's put ourselves in Joe's shoes. You just landed the perfect ogre boost, 1 in hundreds, maybe 1 in 1,000. Then begins the agonizing 60-second wait, knowing that you have to land another next to impossible trick when the elevator finally reaches the bottom. Let's try waiting with Joe on his descent.
How long has it been?
6 seconds.
Did your hands get sweaty? Did your heart rate increase? I'm sure Joe's did. Finally, after a week of attempts, determined not to lose the throne on a map he had ruled for more than 2 decades, Joe performed this incredible run. Both tricks were flawless, and in particular the double Vorball boost was the fastest anyone had ever seen, even in practice or theoretical demos. Joe gets launched into the exit in the blink of an eye, the perfect end to an iconic run. The ogre boost was also as good as it can get, hitting him at the exact moment to maximize speed and distance. It's safe to say that both Chambers and Joe's demos will be on the records for the rest of time. Congrats guys, and GG. Well, maybe not for the rest of time. For quite a while, I've been sitting on an idea for the first boost on Nightmare skill. By combining an Ogre Grenade Jump with a Fiend boost at the beginning, it's actually possible to skip the button and raising the bridge altogether, saving about half a second over Joe's time. This trick is much more difficult and RNG dependent than any other trick on this map. But theoretically, combined with all of the perfect FPS tricks and perfect movement, it might just be enough to save another full second. It could be that this is all too ambitious for a human run and needs to be reserved for Taz records. But who knows, maybe somebody out there will surprise us and inspire one last video on E2M6. Thanks for listening and see you later.